Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I'm going to dabble a bit in a game that I haven't played in a long time, but was definitely memorable for different reasons. And it's one of those games that gotten re-released on PlayStations here and there, but don't think it was ever remastered, and that being Vagrant Story. Vagrant Story was one of those late era PS1 games. And it was made by the team who did Final Fantasy Tactics and later Final Fantasy 12. But they went for a kind of hack and slash pseudo turn based kind of thing. And it went for it's very obscure in the way it processes things. I definitely want to preface this by saying it's been a while. I reintroduced myself to the story and to the gameplay fairly recently, but even so, it's still very hard to kind of wrap my head around it. And I felt this same way about stuff like, say, Parasite Eve and whatnot, though I think this was a bit more on the awkward side, even for that. I give them credit for a game like this, and it's got definitely a following, but I would be remiss if I didn't say I have some issues with it. So I'm not going to play nice. Realistically, what it was attempting, I can see it. The end result, though, the prime example, theory and execution, all again. Same idea. And honestly, same deal with Final Fantasy Tactics. It is everybody's favorite game. But I just can't fucking play it. Which happens. I would spend forever probably talking about games that I just don't fucking understand and don't get, but I don't want to, go down that road until I have to in an episode. But suffice it to say, stuff like Tactics and Final Fantasy 12 and Vagrant Story have their fans. I'm just not one of them. Mostly due to gameplay reasons more than anything else. But there are awkward things about it that I do like. But again, I think it's execution that leave a lot to be desired. But story, vibes, it is certainly unique, if nothing else. It is memorable in its own weirdness. And not even in the Japanese weirdness, it's an anime-based game. There's a lot of weird Japanese shit in it. No. It's weird for the macabre stuff it does, in the vague sense. It doesn't even outwardly do macabre stuff until you see it in action. It mostly just kind of lulls you into the dark shit, but it doesn't, expressly go that way. It's not like a shonen. It's more of just like a drama, and the story stuff is there. And part of why I find it is a bit confusing is I remember reading up on it in preparation for this was much like, say, Final Fantasy VIII, where they translated things wrong or didn't want to fit a thing in there or couldn't fit it in there. Apparently, data storage limits made it so they basically cut a lot of the story bits, whether that's true or not. And that stuff happens for lots of games. This is not new. So Vagrant Story being on the awkward side makes sense in theory, and, well, knowing that makes sense in execution. But the story that is there, you can interpret enough. Say if kind of like a Castlevania game or a Mega Man game or something like that, where you just you don't really need to worry so much. You get to stabbing, and it tells you a story, and it's 10 hours, 15 hours-ish, but it's not going to win awards, but it does it in a unique setting in a unique way, and I think that's where the allure of it comes in. Because the vagueness of it doesn't kill it. I think a lot of other things about the game kill it, but that's just me. But storyline-wise, you have a setting, a city known as Leamond. We're in the world of Ivalice. Vaguely defined world of Ivalice vaguely defined because it has or isn't defined in tactics in any way. Neither really is 12, so it's its own world. The people making these games all have their own world, and they weave it in and out. Again, all I know, Vagrant Story takes place in this place. And in that world, their version of France, there is a city known as Le Mans, which I will give them credit for. When they actually set this up, they went to France to scout out some cities, and they found a couple, and then they zeroed in on a specific one, and they found, just the cities, the settings, the layouts, everything. It looks interesting because everything is painstakingly detailed for a late PS1 game. The character models, the ambiance, all that stuff is painstaking. What's a bit frustrating is there's not really a lot of music. It's made by Hitoshi Sakamoto, and I couldn't tell you anything about this that I was really remembering, other than the fact that it's almost non-existent. There are areas in the game where there's no music at all, and it's kind of just frightening. The Xenosaga 1 did the same thing. Whether they forgot to put stuff in, which is certainly possible, or they chose not to, it just lends certain areas, especially the towns, a little bit of just awkwardness, because the workshops have music when you're doing the workshop stuff, but as soon as you walk back outside, they don't. The catacombs tend to have music, the forest does, the final dungeon does, all the caves, they have music, but for some reason the outward town doesn't. And I'm not saying this is Sakamoto's best or anything. I still think that would be, say, Odin's here. But you've heard Sakamoto before. You're not really, going crazy with his stuff. It's more mood music, and I suppose that fits. But the story, again, I think is what drives this game. And even with what is there, as opposed to what could have been, I'm still enthralled by it because it does interesting things. It's not telling the story of, mamby-pamby people and doing mamby-pamby things. This is kind of like a more Western-esque game. By and large, JRPGs tend to focus on teenagers and doing teenage things and coming-of-age stories or killing gods and, shit. This is more, Western RPG influenced. And I think that serves it well to at least give it some kind of, and Square Enix tends to do that. They have their cliches that pull from it, but they also, when they need to, they focus more on Western style storytelling. And this definitely lended itself to that. You have this private organization, offshoot of a military known as the Riskbreaker Unit. One of them, Ashley Riot, goes to Le Mans because he's tasked with finding Sydney Lostero. And you'll note that I'm not doing any voice acting stuff because there was no voice acting. This was not voice acted. Nothing until Final Fantasy X was, unfortunately. Some other games might have been, but whatever. I keep thinking this is a Final Fantasy game because it's made by the Tactics guys. Whatever. But Ashley and his half-assless chaps go to Le Mans, and he goes to find Sydney. He learns that he's meant to assassinate them by this Duke, but he's also being given help by this Merlot's person, and he doesn't really want the help. He doesn't really care about her, doesn't need her help. She kind of does her own thing as a captive audience to Sydney's thing, because midway through the game, Sydney and his assistant capture her, and they capture other people. I think there are multiple reasons why Ashley's after him. save a hostage that Sydney has, but also kill him and make sure that whatever dark shit happens in Leomond does not happen. Or at least does not happen with Sydney, causing it. Turns out, and in a weird way, I think Sydney is wanting Ashley to do that himself. So that's where the weird vagueness comes in. Like, he's the one taunting you, but he's also sometimes your ally, because there's 2 or 3 other people who are enemies in different things. One of them being Guildenstern, one being Rosencrantz. Haha, nice Shakespeare reference. But I believe it's Shakespeare. But Rosencrantz fucks around with Ashley midway through the game, but he's kind of a side villain. The main villain is Guildenstern, and they meet up several times. He's also chasing against Sydney because he wants the dark power for himself. Because of course he fucking does. Why wouldn't he? But Ashley's doing stuff and, constantly learning about these people, but he's also dealing with his own demons. He's an unreliable narrator. And part of the Rosencrantz issue is he's telling him that Ashley did not see his parents or his family die. It was something he himself caused. So whether that's true or not, Ashley does not know. He's kind of just left to his own devices, and we also don't really know the answer to it. It's left to interpretation. Sometimes those are the best stories. Again, enough about the story is there. You have to go to a town because this dark shit's going to happen. You got to kill a guy. And then you find out you got to kill some more dudes, or they'll kill other dudes, and then, nobody's on the same side. So, whatever. None of the characters feels half-assed, though. Everybody feels like they play a part. And I give it enough credit for doing something. Again, I'm coming from the Final Fantasy background. This is them doing a different style of game. For doing an action-based game and having enough story that I still felt engaged, despite really not feeling the combat, made me want to play the game more to experience it and learn about it, and you just understand why these characters were doing the way they were doing it. Still, again, I think the execution is a little vague, and Sydney's motivations, they make sense in the obscure, in the subtext, but you're trying to make heads or tails of his stuff. It's that very, like, you're never quite sure what is he doing, why is he doing it kind of thing. And that's where I think the frustration lies, is they do give it payoff, but it does feel like it takes its time. Not as much as, say, 12, though, where there's this gigantic fucking gap of no story until you get to the end of the game. And it's like, why was there so much story here, and then like 6 or 7 hours, no movement? And this at least keeps a pace, because, every 45 minutes or so you're in a new area and you're doing things. But realistically, whether you like Vagrant Story or not, I like it for the story and the setting. I don't really like its gameplay. There are a lot of reasons why. And one of them, I might as well just mention it right now. I could do an episode on it if I try hard enough to look through the list. I saw it again as I was doing the prep work. I rolled my eyes at the sheer amount of weaponry and shields and armor that you can create in this game. So much so that I thought Legend of Mana had a better system. Because, fuck, dude. Those two games are neck and neck when it comes to just the amount of shit that you can craft. And I don't understand either of them. Because this is a simpler system, but I still never felt like I was any stronger or better because I kept fucking it up. So, the way you do damage makes sense. What is the enemy type? What is the affinity? And then what is your damage type? Should make total sense. But when I'm in the thick of things trying to come up with, okay, I need a new sword, or I need a new shield, or how about 10 different weapon types? And then they all share 3 distinct things. So you have to figure out which ones have this kind of damage and this kind of damage and then disadvantage over that one. And you're like, ah, fucking hell. And then you realize there's like 7 or 8 different armor classifications. You got wood, you got bronze, you got iron, something called Hagane, which I think is, I don't know what the American equivalent of that. That has to be a Japanese one. Damascus, silver and Damascus, right? But it's like when you're in the creation mode, you're just like, what are these numbers? The class and the affinity and the edged. Are they going up or are they going down? Why the fuck are they going down? I don't get this. But then you realize you need multiples because every enemy has a different class. Human, evil, phantom, beasts, undead, stuff like that. So you have to compensate for that. They also have an elemental affinity. A lot of bosses are elemental based. So they could be elemental dragons or elemental spirits. You got to compensate for that. And then you have these gemstones that can also improve certain facets. So you have to compensate for that too. So you could potentially just have a fucking storehouse full of weapons because you don't know which types of weapons do what to where, how. And you just gotta experiment. And if you're into that sort of thing, that's great. I like simplicity. Me stab, you die. Right? I like me stab, you die. Is the number bigger? Go. Give me bigger number. That's all I need to know. Is it bigger? Go. If I'm willing to fiddle with a system, it's because it's something like a job class. A job system. I'm not like so fussy on that because there's only so many different ways you can mess with a class. When you're doing weapons, and then you add in the fact that it has your favorite fucking thing in the world, weapon degradation. Oh, goody. So you add weapon degradation, so you need to grab the weapons and you gotta keep them and then you gotta get rid of them because they're old and they shatter. Not as much as, say, Breath of the Wild, but it's still annoying. So, let's say you do all that. Okay, well, how do you fight a thing? How do you go from there to stab a thing? Well, let's say you go to the catacombs. That's where you start. You don't even do the workshop stuff first. I just threw that there because I knew that was the big thing Vagrant Story had. And maybe I'll do an episode on the crafting system because God fucking help me. Anyway, let's say, how does the game work? Ashley runs around. He does puzzles in a catacomb. You have to open doors, open locks. You have these cloud stone things that kind of, while you're doing puzzles, whether they're wind puzzles or monster puzzles, you got to kill monsters. You're floating on platforms or you're jumping on stuff. You can jump a little bit. You can move stuff. It's very Zelda or Metal Gear-esque, jumping on things, moving stuff, doing things, action gameplay. Then when you fight an enemy, well, that's where the fun bit, that's where the Parasite Eve-ness of it comes in, because the Parasite Eve came first. But it's a different system. But you have the class of the enemy. Okay, take a bat. It's a beast. Okay, you're killing a beast. Or you're killing a wolf. It's a beast. It's a beast, whatever. Say you can attack its head. You stop, and you get this like weird, I don't know, what was it in Fallout? VAT system? It's not directly the same thing, but it stops the game, and then you can pick head, body, arm, legs, stuff like that. And each monster has not only its weaknesses, its affinities, and you have to fight against its weaknesses, but you also have to hit different parts of the body. So you got a hit percentage chance, you've got, you can do more damage to a thing and then stop them from using magic or making them weaker or doing speed stuff. It's very intricate. And I found myself not doing a lot of damage in some spots. Unless you realize that the risk system is also at play. So while you're trying to do damage, what you're realizing is that Ashley's risk numbers go up. So it's not just his own stats and his armor and his weapons you have to deal with. You have to deal with the risk thing. So it's kind of like a limit break or a fury gauge. It's like the fury stat in Final Fantasy VII, which really has never really come up ever again. I guess they didn't like it. But that's beside the point. The Fury status effect sucked in 7, but it had its uses. But Risk is kind of a weird double-edged sword because Risk forces you to have a lower hit chance while you get higher crits. But I realistically just found I was missing dudes from the game that I remember. I was always missing. And you have these like timed hits. He would do these flourishes, kind of like Legend of Dragoon, but they weren't timed on screen. You just kind of had to do, you would do better or worse, and you'd slowly get it. And he would kind of do a little dance with each move, and you slowly get it, and that's how you really pile up damage. Is you not only do magic, and you have status buffs or debuffs, but you have timed hits, and you can time your hits, and you have to deal with the risk gauge, and you have all these other things going against you. So all of these calculations are going on in this system, and you're trying to understand this monster, and then that monster, and then that boss, and then that boss, and then that boss. So if you're like into puzzles or tactical gameplay, something like that, I think Vagrant Story would be your thing. Like puzzle platforming, interesting bosses, like that is cool. I really am not. I like the simplicity of knowing, okay, you're an elemental type, boom, I fucking killed you, or you fucking killed me, That's probably why I'm having so much trouble in Bravely Default right now. Anything that isn't, I can poison you, you're fucking dead after 10 fucking turns or 100 fucking turns. Okay, I'll do damage while I'm waiting for you to tick damage, shit like that. I felt the same way about Final Fantasy VII Remake. I just let certain bosses fucking die to poison. Anyway, I like a streamlined boss approach. So having to deal with numbers and percentages and damage types and a second damage type and a third damage type and weapon classes and gems and other things racked my brain something fierce. And then I think another annoyance for me was knowing that you fight a boss. It's great. Several bosses are basically reskins. So you fight a couple Minotaurs, you fight a couple Phantom Lords and elemental genie things, but after a while the areas also start to blend together too, and specifically the catacombs, the sewers. Like the catacombs early, like you see them 2 or 3 times. They're different parts of the catacomb, sure, but they're catacombs. You've seen them. In a 10-hour game, it doesn't feel cool anymore. Going to a second or third sewer doesn't feel fun anymore. Oh, it looks more blue now. Okay, cool. Am I facing harder enemies? I must be in the right place. The cityscapes are fine. I think the forest area is a unique puzzle in and of itself. But other than that, like I'm fighting 3 or 4 different dragon types. I'm fighting 2 or 3 minotaurs and facing off against one I'd already killed, who's harder now because he's undead, because that's how that works. For a game that is not that long, it has an issue of repetition. And when you're not given a lot of like other stuff other than the story, a lot of things compound on themselves. So it's not even that I hate the game outright. I'm just stating that there are distinct issues that prevent me from liking it more than I should, And would I recommend Vagrant Story? I'd say if you're into story or if you're into puzzle games or puzzle style games of either the battle type or the puzzle type, sure. You'll get something out of it. You'll get like an East game with a bit more like teeth, I would say. Like an action-y game, like a Zelda-y game meets an East game, but also like tactical in that sense. A lot more tactical. Very, rough idea of what you'd be expecting. Puzzle game stuff. I'm sure there's a game like this. Whether it's better or worse, I'm sure there are games like it. But this one stands alone because it has, like, for its time and for the fact that it was from Square, it definitely is different. Would I recommend it for somebody like me who's going into it from, like, say, a normal JRPG, Not really. Like, even action-based RPGs like Ace, those are the ones I like. Straightforward, simple, list platforming. Like, Oath of Felghana or Oath in Felghana. Like, that would be jump in platforming, do this stuff, but you're really just stabbing dudes. This has a lot of layers of puzzles and tactical stuff. I don't know any game like it. So it's hard to go from an East game, and it's funny because I played East games long after this, but I got used to those because of their simplicity. They were very easy to get into. You'll get a depth in this that will either drive you nuts like it did for me, or you will just dive into it and analytically just think, I need to min-max, I need to do this, I need to fight this. If you're into that kind of stuff, you'll have a ball. And I think the story will carry you a long way. I just wanted the story bits because I think the characters are engaging and I think the story is unique for something Square would do. But it does come with caveats. So again, it's dependent on the style of game and the style of gamer that you are, whether you're gonna like it or not. But that'll do for today. And again, I went a little freeform with this one because it's been a while since I played it, but it's definitely stuck with me despite years and years. So anytime I go back and experience it, I'm like, oh, I remember now. Anyway, so I've done Zenju. I haven't uploaded it until tomorrow because I record things like 2 weeks in advance. Anyway, we've got Gangsta December 6th. December 20th is Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. January 3rd is Kowloon Generic Romance, and a game I am very intimately familiar with recently, which I'll talk about in mid-January, will be Suikoden 1 and 2, because I will have beaten it by then, I'm absolutely sure. I've got 2 months to do it. But that'll do for me, and I will see you next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.